What if I said that sticking to one lens could change your photography forever? Not because of the lens itself, but because of what it forces you to notice. Joel Meyerowitz believed that you should choose one focal length and stick with it, because he believed that those restrictions would help you to shape your vision as a photographer or as an artist. So I wanted to test that theory. That is what I'm going to explore in this new series. I'm going to test this theory, share my results with you guys. I will also be reviewing the actual lenses that I use along the way. And for the first episode, I'm going to be reviewing the Voigtlander Nokton Classic 35mm f1.4. So stick around. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Allie, and I love to talk about vintage cameras and the film that I shoot with them. If that sounds like something you like, you come to the right place. So let's get to today's video. So like I mentioned, Joel Meyerowitz said that photography itself helps you find your identity because it reveals the things you find interesting. He himself even worked inside his own boundaries that he set, like setting a shutter speed and sticking to that shutter speed. He also chose a focal length and stuck to that. I think it was 35mm. And he found that it made him think more, and says that he found himself through that introspection. If you're not familiar with his work, I have affiliate links down below in the description of the books that I own myself, that I studied. I got a lot of really good advice from these books, and that's why I'm making this series. So now I found this theory to be really interesting because when I first started out, I barely gave lenses a second thought. I often just used whatever came with the camera that I bought, which was usually either an off-brand zoom lens or oftentimes a 50mm lens. That is the focal length that most people dub the most true to life, and often it's the most recommended to beginners. But as time went on and I started shooting with more lenses and more cameras, I started to notice that my lens may actually be the most important part of my photography. Let me explain. So Ted Forbes, if you're not familiar with him, he has a YouTube channel. I highly recommend you look him up, but he said that photography is more about what you choose to subtract from your photos, not what you add to them. And that really clicked for me when I moved to 35mm, because as my photography matured, so to speak, the more control I wanted to have over what I could or could not include in my compositions. I wanted to be more intentional. And for me, that meant I needed to go wider, because with the 50mm, I felt a little too restricted. But 6 years ago, I switched to the 35mm lens. I'll talk more about that specific lens in a minute, but as I started to review my results with the 35mm focal length for the first time, the more I recognized that I liked to include more than just the subject. I liked to include the surroundings, and I liked to be able to tell more of a story or convey more of a feeling using the background. And I didn't realize it then, but this was the first step towards finding my point of view. And since this is the lens that I've used through most of my photography journey, I think it's worth talking about the tool behind these photos. I bought this lens 6 years ago, mainly to use on my Leica M2 that I had just purchased. You can check out my video about that camera. I'll put a link or a box up here. But in that video, I explained that the M2 has recorded many, many special events in my life, and this lens was the eye I saw them through. It's by far been my most used lens, and that is why I chose it to be the star of this first episode. So back then, all those years ago, why did I choose a Voigtlander lens rather than just get a Leica lens to go with my Leica camera? That answer is very simple: the price. At the time, I decided to invest in the camera body first and go a little bit more budget for the lens. And then I figured I would save up and get a 35mm Summicron, which I did end up doing. But as you can see, I still own this lens, and I think that tells you a lot about this lens. But let me explain. So there are several reasons that I love this lens. First would be the Nokton part. Nokton tells you that the aperture of the lens is a fast aperture. It's f1.4, which means it's very good in low lighting. That extra stop compared to the Summicron has been actually perfect for my specific needs, especially when I first started out. I was experimenting a lot with pushing film because the house that we lived in was a lot darker than the one we live in now, so I needed to be able to take photos in low lighting. Now let's get to the main reason that you are here, and most likely, and that is because you want me to talk about this lens and whether or not it is a good lens or a bad lens. I think you could probably deduce from everything I've said so far that is a good lens, but let's talk about the good and the bad of the Voigtlander Nokton 35mm f1.4. So that goes with the second reason that I love this lens, and that would be the ergonomics. The aperture ring has the perfect click at every stop and in between every stop. Let's see if you could hear it. The aperture ring has a grip on either side, which makes it ultra intuitive to be able to open and close your aperture without even having to look, because you can feel those grips. I wish all my lenses had that feature. The same goes for the focusing ring. The focusing ring also has a spot for your index finger, which makes it really smooth and really easy to focus. It has a throw that situates your middle finger perfectly so that your pointer and thumb will be changing your aperture. So I literally, when it's mounted on the camera, can do both things at the same time without even looking. As for the cheaper price, it's still not a cheap price tag by any means. This is still a premium lens for a premium camera. It is only more affordable when compared to the Summicron, way more affordable. But however, it doesn't feel breakable in my hands. It does not feel cheap by any means. It has an aluminum barrel and a brass mount and a brass helicoid, so you do feel a little bit of weight from that brass, but the aluminum helps counterbalance that. That's the lighter part. It feels substantial also while not being too heavy and not being too large. Without the lens hood, you can see how compact that lens is. The lens hood can make it a little more bulky when you're trying to put it in your camera bag. That's the only thing I've noticed, is this part can be a little annoying when you're trying to have a compact carry. But other than that, it is a very compact lens. So most importantly, how does this lens render? You've been seeing examples of photos that it takes all throughout this video, so you kind of have an idea, but let's talk about it anyway. Voigtlander wanted to emulate the classic character of lens designs from the 1960s and the 70s. While this lens is fairly young compared to the other lenses, it's only about almost 10 years old at this point, it still has its own character. When wide open at 1.4, there can be some vignetting. I notice it more in low lighting situations. The bokeh, I like to say, is a little messy. It sort of swirls around the bottom of the picture, and it's more noticeable at the edges with the vignetting. But in my opinion, these things are what give it that 1960s, 70s vintage vibe, and to me that is the character of this lens itself. As for lens flare, because it is a wide lens, I've actually never noticed any major glare. I've shot outdoors with it without the lens hood on, but I do generally keep it on just in case. But I've never noticed any big issues like I have with my 28mm lens. So back to the theory and the theme of this video, which is how has this lens helped me find my point of view? Honestly, at first it was frustrating. I was used to shooting the 50mm, as I mentioned, isolating subjects, keeping things clean and simple with that lens. With the 35mm, everything was in the frame. It felt messy, I felt out of control, like I was having to crop everything because I wasn't used to it. Because I was starting to have to, like Ted Forbes said, I was starting to have to consciously subtract from my photos rather than add the way I did with a 50mm. And I really quickly realized I couldn't shoot the same way anymore like I did with the 50. I had to move closer, I had to slow down, and I actually had to look at everything in the frame before I was taking a shot. So it helped me to slow down and to start really being intentional, and that was my goal. I'm paying attention to what I include and, more importantly, what I leave out. And I think that's the biggest shift. I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned. The 35mm didn't just change my photos, it changed how I see as a photographer. So I've been trying to find my vision and my style as a photographer for many years now. I've shot with many different focal lengths and zooms throughout the years and never gave it enough thought really to do so. But I'm changing that with this series, and this experiment so far has been a lot of fun. Setting boundaries has let me be free to concentrate more on other things like color and composition. I always believed that having more options would make me a better photographer, but now I think I'm learning it's actually the opposite. It turns out having less might be what I needed, and maybe you too, because it forces you to pay attention. I'm excited to see what I will learn with other focal lengths that I'm going to use in this series and in future episodes, and I hope you will stick around with me and learn and grow with me. Maybe you'd like to do this too, and if you do, let me know down in the comments. Or maybe you already have a lens that represents your vision. Either way, let me know, and if you enjoyed this, let me know by hitting that thumbs up, and if you want to contribute to the channel, there's a link down in the description where you can donate. I hope to see you back here in the next one, and as always, stay motivated and keep shooting.